Welcome to episode 293 of the Working Fans Podcast, where there is a lot of wrestling to talk today. If you think there's a lot of wrestling to talk today, wait till next week. We have a WrestleMania preview for you, whole lot of WrestleMania talk. We'll bring that up at the end of the episode. But at the start, a lot of people that watch us don't subscribe, and it takes a second. It's nothing for you. It means the world to us, and it helps you find out the next time we talk live about wrestling. And this week we are going to talk because it was Rey Fenix's second week on SmackDown. Dave, did you catch this match, and what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a great match, right? Oh, God, Berto. What's Berto's last name?
Carrillo.
Wait, say it again?
Carrillo.
Berto Carrillo? Okay. And his partner is Angel Garza, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, high-flying luchador action, great second match. Nathan Frazier was great for that too. But what I like here is the stuff with Escobar, where Escobar came out afterwards and kind of put over Phoenix. I like this because I feel like it's setting up one or two possible things here. They could be setting up that he's going to recruit Phoenix, and maybe Berto and Angel are going to turn on Escobar, or this is all Escobar just, building up Phoenix, and he's going to be the one who, when Phoenix lets his guard down, beats him up, and we're going to set up an Escobar-Phoenix match at some point. I think it gives Santos Escobar something to do, and it's a great first program for Rey Fenix.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could see both happening. Rey Fenix fighting his way through the Legado del Fantasma and then ending up with being invited in, possibly turning, and then you've got Berto and Garza versus Phoenix and Santos. Either way, it's great to see it continuing on, and I like that they're building up Phoenix and Penta separate, but I can't wait till the Lucha Brothers hit, if they hit, in WWE.
I agree.
Last Sunday we talked about AEW Dynasty. Were you able to catch the event? And
yes, I was.
What did you think of it, besides that it was, in Wei Ting from Post Wrestling's words, way too fucking long?
Well, that's about what to expect with AEW pay-per-views. They're too long. I can't watch them in one sitting really anymore. I just got too much going on in my life. What did I think? Without even pulling up the card or anything from last week here, I remember that that triple threat with Mike Bailey, Omega, and Ricochet. I thought, really tearing it up, really made Speedball look great. We're hinting at Omega and Okada still. We're setting that up for AEW All In. It was, what else was funny too, was like I was watching this and nothing really shocked me. In fact, there was a match we disagreed on, and I remember afterwards I was watching this. I'm like, I should have went with that. Joe was definitely right. I can't remember what match that was, but
I remember that a lot of your predictions were right for this show, mainly because they were more like straightforward. I was thinking of kind of wild possibilities that could happen.
Adam Cole. That was the one where I didn't actually go at. I went with, Daniel Garcia. And afterwards, as the match was coming up and they were setting it up, they talked about Adam Cole 17 years in his business. I'm like, this story is really more geared about Adam Cole getting this. Like, he needs to get this at this point,
Yeah, I was able to watch half the show live. I haven't gone back and finished it. It was great seeing Tony Storm and Megan Bayne. I love that went on earlier. Mm-hmm. I expected that to be like a co-main event, but it was great to see. Once again, with AEW pay-per-views, the in-ring action is never going to let you down.
No.
Unless it's like a Chris Jericho match as of late.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you think of that match? I thought that was clunky, and I think it's good he's taken some time away because it just seems not his time at the moment.
Right. No, I got no problem with that. I mean, I heard somebody saying Jericho said recently he was open to coming back to WWE. And honestly, like, I think there's potentially good trades where, there's good people in WWE like, Bobby Lashley and Benjamin who've really done well in AEW. So I don't want to sound just like this, but I think Jericho's a guy who would probably benefit from going to WWE at this point in his career and maybe having a farewell tour there, like a John Cena, like, be fresh, be new, be big for that audience, but probably make this your last year. And then, I'd like to see Jericho, in a Shawn Michaels type role, maybe helping produce and develop talent at this stage of his career. I don't know what he wants to do, but that would be what I'd like to see for the guy, honestly.
Yeah, because Jericho started off great in AEW.
Yes.
And I hate to say that he's gotten a little stale as time has gone on because I'm such a Jericho fan, but it's like the learning tree was like the first gimmick for me that just didn't go over.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that he's trying new things. I love that he's still in it, but this just doesn't seem to be the place. And when you bring up his interest in going back to WWE at some point, it's almost like, why not?
Yeah.
And then you can do the producer schedule on like a little bit lighter of a schedule, still be able to do the Fozzy stuff, and maybe get a little bit more of that aura back.
The only one thing I wanted to say before we forget about this show that I thought I also did enjoy was in the main event with Swerve and Mox, the Ops, Hook, Samoa Joe, Shibata all came down and stopped the Death Riders. Now, obviously, the Bucks were the big surprise, and they ended up costing, Swerve, and where that's going to lead, I don't know. But for me, I just like to see the rise of the Ops. I like to see Shibata and Joe particularly back in a major storyline, and Hook being elevated and all that stuff. And I'm enjoying this stuff with Hangman and Swerve. From a storyline standpoint, the fact that Swerve basically is saying I was wrong for doing all that stuff. And, then we saw on Dynamite where, Swerve's manager there, I'm blanking out. Was that?
Prince Nana,
yeah. He wants to apologize, and Hangman just says, no, you don't get to do that. It's, it's good television, I think, for these guys. I think some of AEW's best storytelling always seems to be centered around Swerve and Hangman.
Yeah, a lot of great storytelling going on in AEW. And Dave,
yes,
we're 6 weeks in. We've asked the question every week. Is this the week that Dave has gotten to check out Evolve?
I watched some of it. I watched some of the most recent episode. I watched Swipe Right get involved in the first. Oh, sorry.
Oh, in that big 8-man tag match at the start.
8-man tag. Yeah, it was cool to see Jack Cartwheel in there. This guy, Darko. What's his? You remember his name? Not Darty Darko.
In the 8-man tag?
Yeah.
You talking about the white guy with the do-rag?
He reminds me of the guy from TikTok with the red hair. That's what I wanted to tell you. He used to send me videos of all the time.
Oh, man. I miss that guy from TikTok. Yeah, he's one of the odder characters I've seen pop up and evolve. Not terrible. He was the one that was in the match with Bryce Donovan. Yeah, Bryce Donovan, another guy that wrestled a lot and beyond, part of that WWE ID program.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that week 6 was good. It wasn't quite what week, I think 4 was, whatever week Timothy Thatcher was on. It's still good. Yeah. And you can see that it's getting more of an identity. The more you see these guys, the more you see the character introduced and then fleshed out. But from what you saw in week 6, do you think it'll get you to go back, or was it just another I might check in eventually?
Might check in eventually if I have time. I don't find it as pressing. I do like the fact, I said this last week, that Swipe Right showed up on NXT. It was a way to get me interested. I like that Timothy Thatcher's there. I see he made a little cameo this week too, where he was kind of popping in there with somebody. Looked like they were kind of almost getting ready to challenge Swipe Right and Donovan and that crew. But I'll have to see a little more to win me over. This Chewy Martinez guy too that does some of the interviews. He kind of reminds me of some DJ from MTV in the 90s.
Yeah, he's the part of it that hasn't clicked for me. I like that they do something different with the ringside reporter. But I've seen, maybe it's just because we've seen enough pro wrestling reporters done the real way. that when you see it this way, it almost feels too amateurish. And I mean, I'm sure people like GCW have done something similar, and it seems to fit. I'm sure I could get used to it, and I do like that it gives it a unique feel. But if there was anything that throws me off about Evolve, that's one of the things. Oh no, the redheaded do-rag guy is in the 8-man tag. I'm actually watching it right now.
Yeah.
But let's talk about something else we watched this week.
Yeah.
Dark Side of the Ring, Vader. This was one of the episodes I'd say we were looking forward to the most. What did you think of it? I love the insight we got.
Okay, big takeaway, which I talked about last week when they set the preview of this, was the stuff with Joe Thurman. That I really found that uniquely interesting in the sense, especially hearing more from Joe Thurman this week, where Joe Thurman, the preliminary wrestler who got his back broken by Vader, and hearing how severe that was, that he almost got his spine severed, the impact. But he said that, they went into the match and Vader it was like he flipped and became another person, called him a piece of shit. And he said, "You better jump, you piece of shit." And, he beats up. And then he said it was like he snapped back. He doesn't even really cover me or touch me. And, in the back, he was crying, and then you see, I guess he goes to the hospital and Thurman just rips into him. But he says, "I always wondered, I'll never know, what caused, Vader to flip in that situation." Other than that, I really love the footage with Hanson. I love some of the old footage from AWA when he was just wrestling as Baby Bull Leon White. I don't know why I never knew this. I should have, but that his mask was actually controlled remotely. That they had someone else operating the mask. I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, it was great. Obviously seeing Joe Thurman, seeing all the old footage. I could have done without the eye footage, but they had Stan Hansen in there talking about it. So that was a great way to cover that. You hear it from Vader's wife at one point too, about how he had turned more into Vader, and then in his later years he was Leon White again. So I think that's something interesting about some of these Dark Side of the Rings when you hear about the persona taking over. But Vader, this is one of the ones I think we were most excited for when it was announced. And then they talked about next week's episode.
Yes.
And you talk about excited for a Dark Side of the Ring episode. Part of me, so obviously super excited because we're going to get to hear, I cannot believe I'm blanking on this dude's name at this moment.
Tony Atlas? He grabbed my pen.
Tony Atlas. Because it's such a dark story, but we're going to get to hear so much of Tony Atlas talk that I feel like that's going to be great. How much do you know about the Tony Atlas story?
I know, he used to like it when women used to step on his face.
Still likes it.
I know, Tony was one of the first wrestlers, honestly, that ever stuck out to me in my childhood. When I always tell people, you know this as well, what got me hooked in wrestling was the Snuka and Piper feud. But before that, I have memories of certain wrestlers that stuck out. One of those was Tony Atlas. Just his, physique and the strength you see him when he press slammed people. I remember Tuesday Night Titans. I think him and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff having a pose down, and they ended up getting into a fight. I always liked Tony.
Yeah, this is going to be a great episode. We'll talk about it afterwards because he had a good section in the Brad Beluchian book, Six Pack, that talked about, his childhood coming up, his family life, and then his later adult life. So it'll be interesting to see what they cover in this. Now, Dave, last week, you and I talked about our ignorance of Jack Brisco matches, and I admit I did not have a ton of time to find Brisco matches on YouTube, and there were a weird variety. And this first one, Jack Brisco versus Dory Funk Jr., I really wanted, because this is the feud that we heard that Dory didn't want to trade the title to Jack Brisco and feigned an injury. And there was one match that was an hour on YouTube, but I figured we got rough schedules this week. We can't fit that in. But I found this little clip from Championship Wrestling from Florida. And what did you think about it before I offer up some thoughts on this?
It was more like an angle. And I thought it was very interesting with the old school press conference in the beginning where Dory is talking about wanting to give Jack a title shot, and Dory Sr.'s there, and he said, "You don't be like Terry. Terry never listens to me." He's like, if you wrestle him, I don't remember what he said, like 20 times, and he managed to beat you once. He said, would he give you that many title defenses or even one? And then, of course, it leads to a match where Boris Malenko looks like he's involved here. And, Dory and Jack end up getting rid of Boris, who's kind of the heel, and they have this great match. And Jack wins. It's kind of more highlights. One thing I noted, by the way, this match really showed me how great I really like Jack Brisco's punches, just the old school style, brawling. But I thought this was more great storytelling where just Dory ends up kind of turning heel. And I really like the level of storytelling for just that era in the 70s, or it might have been 80s so at this point, but it was older. But
it was that 70s, 80s line because they really did the old thing of saying this was an hour match. Yeah. And they're like, they've wrestled a half hour. Here are the highlights of the end. The press conference at the beginning got me. Coming at you from the Fort Homer Hesterly Armory, big in Florida wrestling history. And I loved everything about it. Once it got through everything, because press conference, Dory Sr., then you had Boris Malenko trying to get in the match, attacking Jack Brisco. And this was like the shortest of the files that we watched. The next one had to put, one of the best wrestlers that we've watched tons of matches with over the years, Ric Flair, against somebody we hadn't seen in the ring, Jack Brisco. This was great because this was from those NWA TV studios.
Yep.
Do you know the name of the wrestler in the ring that Ric Flair racially insults early on? I did not catch his name.
When did we employ them? Yeah.
Yeah, where I come from, we don't wrestle guys like that. We employ them, which I was like, that's both racist and progressive at the same time, it feels like.
Yeah, there's some messed up shit from this era. You know what? I had it. I don't know the name. I didn't write it down. He was obviously like one of the preliminary wrestlers. And then, again, I like the storytelling. Wall McDaniel's the one who comes out and wants to fight Flair, it looks like, but it's the bait and switch. And then Jack Brisco's in the ring, and suddenly we got a Brisco-Flair match. And I will say, I'll keep it short with this one, but this felt in a lot of ways similar to Steamboat Flair. Just a lot of counter wrestling, mixed in with a little bit of brawling, great pacing, the backslide finish where he catches one on Rick. It's all well done. And this is where I think you see a little bit more on how good Jack Brisco is.
Oh, yeah, the storytelling was great. The way Flair's agreeing to a match with it seems like Wahoo, and then he looks in the ring and it's Jack Brisco. And it was great to see Flair keeping up with Brisco, knowing that, the legend that Brisco has in the ring. So I think it makes Flair seem that much more of a good wrestler. Or, I don't know, maybe it's on Jack Brisco for making him look that way. But if you want to talk about a great wrestling match in the ring, and this is not one I would have expected, Jack Brisco versus Roddy Piper. I thought this was the standout of all the matches, and I was very surprised to see Piper go like he was in the ring with the legend like we've heard of, like Jack Brisco.
I grew up Piper as a heel in the 80s, and then, came the babyface and became more about character. But man, I mean, Piper was a great vicious heel, but here you could see he could really go. He was going hard, and this was a physical match. This was by far my favorite out of all these matches. It starts off with great mat wrestling where Piper's kind of keeping up with him, but Brisco's got the edge like a good babyface should. But it was very similar to what we would see years later, almost like with Benoit and Kurt Angle, where they're mat wrestling each other. And you figure Angle's going to blow him out of the water, but Benoit's kind of keeping up with him. And that breaks into more of a brawl as the match going on. And they were hitting each other. Like, these were solid shots, the chops, the punches, the forearms, everything you could just hear. The intensity really got ramped up here, and it ends up being a great angle where basically Piper hits him with some coins, gets the title, and it's, Piper he's just got such an intensity about him with here. This is probably more of a showcase for Piper, but it was a great match to watch with Jack Brisco.
Yeah, definitely. And it was great because it was for that Mid-Atlantic Championship. That money had to be put up as well.
Oh, yeah.
Just Piper selling at the end. You got to see that real Piper attitude coming through. Like I said, this really surprised me. I thought the Dory Funk Jack Brisco match was going to blow my mind, but leave it up to Roddy Piper to impress in the ring. And there was a great crossover on Raw this week, and there's some debate whether it impressed in the ring.
Yeah.
The first, a comedian who had a recent special get released, Lucky on Netflix. Mm-hmm. What did you think of Bert Kreischer's appearance on Raw? And then what we heard about after Raw?
I haven't heard any real negative stuff about Bert. And I don't know why there would be, because Bert was kind of this low key in this. He was in a backstage segment, which you got a great picture of here with Otis. I thought Bert was the perfect way to use a celebrity, just kind of there for what a quick, funny thing with Otis, gets it over. He's in the crowd. And this kind of reminded me what I really like that WWE does with celebrities usually now. We don't really overdo it for the most part, I feel like. Not every celebrity has to have a match. Now, we find out afterwards, after Raw, he ends up chokeslamming Grayson Waller and Austin Theory, which reminded me of, it was Jelly Roll who did that at SummerSlam, the past year too. And I thought, well, this is just Austin Theory and Grayson Waller's role. And maybe they're happy, because people are going home, remembering that. But that didn't bother me again because it was after Raw and it was more a social media thing. So I thought this was well done.
Yeah, when I first heard about it, I thought that was on the show. And I'm like, wow, it's really weird to pair Bert up with CM Punk, a guy who's known for drinking versus a guy who's not. But then when I actually saw the show, and I'm a big fan of Bert, and it was funny because I'm watching this segment with him and Chad Gable, and just watching Bert not interrupt and trying his hardest not to interrupt. Because if you're familiar with his podcast, he's notorious for getting his balls busted about interrupting when somebody else is talking. But he sat through the segment, did it perfectly, and then sold that he was actually here to see somebody else. And it was great when Otis came out. The one thing that was hilarious was he tells Otis at the end of the segment, he's like, Nico, tearing the shirt off is type of my thing. So it was kind of funny that the real name slipped on air.
Oh, yeah. I didn't pick up on that. That's good.
I had the subtitles on. Otherwise, I probably would have been like, what did he just say? But perfect way to use them. I was fine with the choke slams happening after the show. Yeah. It's a little weird that it's with CM Punk, but when it's off TV, it's more like a celebrity and one of your biggest wrestlers in the ring.
It's more for the house show. Yeah.
So I loved hearing about that. And then the other big appearance, which was notable, because the Kill Tony episode that came out on Netflix came out this night, and I actually watched Kill Tony before I checked out Raw. Now, I've been hearing a lot more criticism about this appearance. What is the man called Dave's take on it?
I didn't have a problem with it, but I can see why people would. Tony is a huge fan of pro wrestling, and I don't go as deep into a lot of his comedy like you have. And I know he's rubbed some people the wrong way because of his political, affiliations and stuff like that. Although I don't share his probably political views and support some people. As a comedian, I've always thought he was funny on anything I've seen. That being said, I also know that he's a huge pro wrestling fan. He loves pro wrestling, and this was probably super cool for him. I didn't care that he commentated for one segment. For some people, it took away from the match because he overdid it. I can see that. I could totally see that. It wasn't that bothersome for me. Although it was a unique environment hearing him kind of roast Michael Cole and Cole kind of taking it, but then occasionally clapping back a little bit. It was kind of a unique environment. I couldn't help but wonder. I wonder if Michael Cole is actually cool with this or what he thinks about this. And maybe in a way that takes away from the match, because I'll tell you this much, Joe, maybe you know, but I can't even remember the match now.
Pat McAfee kind of buffered some of those jokes. This was New Day versus War Raiders. It was a great in-ring match. I didn't think Hinchcliffe really kind of overdid it. And like, having done commentary as well, especially like if this is your first time jumping in, it can't be comfortable.
Yeah.
If I had one criticism, it's that I didn't hear that enthusiasm in his voice.
Yeah.
But he's also a performer. He's known for having an even keel. So he sounded like himself. He got a lot of jokes in. I heard about the joke about Big E being the weakest link. People were weird about that.
Which is more of a heel thing. Which is
for me, it was par for the course because Tony was cheering for the heels the whole time. Anytime Xavier Woods got the advantage. So, like, he was almost the perfect heel commentator. I say perfect, but he did very good for a stand-in. I enjoyed it. And like I said, big Kill Tony fan. So to see the cross promotion on this, I thought was great.
There is a thing too, I have to say, kind of separately, but I know Michael Cole was on a Pat McAfee show this week. Pat had a live show, I think, where he had some wrestling appearance, other things going on. And Michael Cole, I guess, was intoxicated. Now, I didn't see the show, but the best of my knowledge, Michael Cole didn't do anything, like he didn't say anything slanderous. He didn't take off his clothes or anything like that. He was just drunk and people picked up on it. And there were people like mad and they're like, oh, this man, this outrage, someone was really mad. And I'm like, gives a fuck. Like, have you seen Pat McAfee's show? Like, people drink and having a good time. Like, this is what they do. You don't like it, don't watch it. But I mean, like, I saw some people actually were outraged about that. And maybe it's the same people outraged by Tony. I mean, I don't know. I felt like he was just trying to be a little bit of a heel, like you said, too.
Yeah.
And it is what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can fault Michael Cole for that, especially being on McAfee's platform. Yeah, if it's on something like WWE Raw, I'm sure you're going to get the Jim Ross treatment where you'll get called out on it.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure that wouldn't fly.
No, and Dave, next week's WrestleMania, are we making the big announcement? Are we dropping the news here?
Yeah, we will be doing some watch-alongs for WrestleMania, possibly
live night 1. Maybe night 2.
Oh, definitely night 1. Okay. So it's funny because we're talking about maybe bringing somebody in, and I feel like both of you have committed possibly to night 1, but nobody seems to be too. But night 2 is Easter. So I guess that's where, like, we'll see what happens. But.
Oh, I wish I had that good a reason to not commit to night 2. I work on Sundays. So, like, it could be a bigger night. I don't know exactly what time I'd get home versus when it starts. So that's why I haven't committed tonight too. I don't have shit going on Easter weekend, so I will be free to do night 1, of course, unless my brother wants to watch it. But we have a big episode for you next week. Yeah. Dave, sorry I'm doing this to you, but you said your schedule was a little more open. Next week, a WrestleMania 1 review. We are looking back at the event that started it all. And WrestleMania is back in Las Vegas. There is a WrestleMania 9 documentary on Peacock.
I had that down.
We got a WrestleMania 41 preview and predictions. Josh Barnett Bloodsport 13 preview and predictions. TNA Unbreakable preview and predictions. We might throw a couple others in there because there is a GCW ID tournament as well as an FSW ID tournament coming up this week. We'll see if we can fit them in. Those are unofficial. But then you think about Mr. WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels. And then you think about the man that arguably created WrestleMania or made it what it was, Hulk Hogan. So we are comparing Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan. Who more earns the title of Mr. WrestleMania? Guys, that is it for episode 293. We have to get on to some business today. But if you want to talk about business, how about some of the great authors and podcasts that we've done business with?
Hey fans, it's the man they call Dave with producer Joe. And you probably know us as the commentary team for New Heights Pro Wrestling. But when we're not doing that, we got a podcast.
That is the Working Fans Podcast, where we talk pro wrestling, comedy, MMA, and so much more.
And tell them about that signature segment.
Oh, you talk about the 531?
You know I am.
That is a homegrown creation that has been our namesake. And if you want to know our namesake, we got Chevy, AJ Strange Brew, as well as the two of us.
And why don't you go to our channel, like, subscribe, show us some love.
Rate, review, all of it.
All you got young wrestling fans out there, listen, old black Bart has got a book. It's called Wrestle. Black Bart. It's got some that good stories in there about some that good wrestlers.
Read stories of Dusty Rhodes, Devon Eric, Scott Casey, Sergeant Slaughter, Roddy Piper, Mr. Fuji, Ron Bass, Bruiser Brody, Mike Davis, The Grappler, and many others.
And I guarantee you one thing. That it'll be the best dadgum read you've had in a long, long time.
Get your book today at Russellville.com or on Amazon. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.
Author Ray Lopez presents Lockup, Professional Wrestling in Our World. Lockup dives headfirst into the colorful world of professional wrestling. Explore the iconic characters, careers, matches, history, and families, and delve into the bizarre and fascinating entwining of professional wrestling and film, television, football, politics, gender, and race. Pre-orders are available now on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com. This is the perfect gift for the wrestling fan in your life. Pick up a copy today on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com.
Read about the Northern Wrestling Federation in the book presented by Russellville.com, The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 2. Hear the story of Roger Ruffin, the man who trained Carl Anderson, the Monster Abyss, Jordan Clearwater, Chris Harris, and Jillian Hall.
Plus 45 other short stories, including Jazz, Bobby Eaton, Kamala, Thunder Rosa, Mario Mancini, Scott Casey, PJ Black, Kerry Morton, Sal Renaro, Jeremiah Plunkett, Colby Carino, Bam Bam Malone, and many others.
Get your book today at Russellville.com. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.